This is a companion video to my blog post on digitizing with StitchArtist. On the left, I have my letter S that has been broken up into my individual pieces. So you can see that each one is now a separate object, and each one of those objects has its own stitch properties that are shown here in the properties pane. So let's see how I broke up part of this letter. For example, this letter S has one large section, and I would like to break it up into three so that this narrow section here has a lighter underlay than the fatter sections, because you don't need to have so much underlay in this one section. If you zoom in close and see, and turn off my 3D, and I'm going to look at our stitches here, you can see that there has the zigzag underlay even under this narrow section, and we don't need that here. So I'm going to choose to break it at these points, one on the left and one on the right, so that we have three objects and I can set each one to have its own underlay settings. So the first thing I'm going to do is since I'm going to be working, I don't need to pay attention to my stitches right now. I'm actually going to, change it to be an object so that I don't have to look at those stitches. Now, to break it across using level 2 or level 1 even, to break any object that's closed, you need to select 2 points and cut across them. So if I wanted to say break it at this point, I double click to add a node, and I want to break it at this point here below. Double click to add a node, select both of those, right click and choose break across. This may change your shape so that you need to, let's put this into a curved. It had been sent to a cusp incorrectly, and we can reshape it so that it will do properly. Now I have my two objects so that I can assign my stitch properties to them. So that's one way of breaking across. I'm going to turn back up and go back to my original design without my nodes by hitting the undo key. And in level 3, we have the graphical operators here at the top. So I am going to choose to add a break line to this object. To do that, I select add break line. I'm going to left click, and I'm done drawing that line, and I'm going to right click to stop. I'm going to add another break line. So I'm left clicking, right clicking to stop. And these lines are where I want to break this one object, so I'll end up with three objects. So I select the object that has the break lines, choose to process those break lines, and now you can see I have three individual objects. So I can select any one of them, turn it into any stitch type that I want, whether it's a fill stitch. In this example, I'd like to be a column stitch. And when you have your column stitches assigned, let me change this one to be a column stitch. And I can go through and add angles of inclinations. I forgot to do that on the little one first. I will do that to this one, right click to end. So now that has its inclinations in it. This one needs to, let's see, I have this one selected. Let me make sure I change my underlay setting on it. So I don't want it to be a zigzag underlay because that was too heavy. I want to uncheck that. But this fatter one needs to have that zigzag underlay. This one here, I am going to, let's zoom out so that we can see it. And I am going to add my column stitch and add my angles of inclination onto it so that my stitches flow in this direction that I want them to. Right click to end, go over to my underlay setting and choose zigzag for this point here. Now, one of the things that I also changed when I was digitizing this was the pattern of the fill stitch. So for example, in this section here, as opposed to having just the satin with a pattern going in the reverse, I switched this to be anchor. And I know that popped off the screen, but that's the anchoring stitch. And I did the same thing for this one. and that made sure that there was no loops when I had my satin stitch. It's just a preference that I happen to choose. Now, if you notice, I have these jump stitches going through here. And that is because I need to step through my design and change my starts and stops. So this object here, which is number 3, is stopping at this point. So if I select this third object or the object next, I need to move my start point to where the stop is of the last object. Need to go to the other one here and move this stop to the end. Select this one and move this stop up to the top, so that now when my design is stitching in order, there's no extra jumps. The other thing I wanted to pay attention to, and we can zoom in to see the top part of our S. When I was stitching this area, let's put the 3D on, we can see that I have it stitching this loop to give the illusion that it is on top of the swoop behind it. That is done by setting this object and this object to stitch. If we look at our stitching order, here's this object, then it stitches this object, and then it stitches this loop on top of it. There is no jump between this object here, which is the top of that swoop where we move the stopping point, and the start of this tail. There's no jump stitch between these, and that's because I created a run stitch that starts at this point, goes underneath the stitches, travels on through, and stops here. And now it starts stitching so that we have no jumps and our design stitches as we expect. So if I go into A to see them all, and we run our sewing simulator, we can see that the left is going to actually stitch exactly like the right, because I've broken it up into smaller objects that are stitching in a particular order. Thank you for watching this video. You can find additional blog posts and information on the Embrilliant software programs from the link in the description of this video below.